Yeah, I really don't think making daily content is for me. Welcome back to the class, everyone. After a grand total of 2 days and about 7 different people asking, we will be covering the Rogue One faction, which you probably just received from getting the new Lightspeed bundle. Now, I do have one disclaimer before we get into the nitty-gritty of mods, Zetas, Omicrons, etc. It is going to be the fact that while this pack is great, you are going to be getting Adrad at Relic 5. Now, I know you already know that, but there is one major implication, and you will see that with the current image on screen. The vast majority of people who owned Adrad before this, because of profundity, had him at Relic 9. The reason why I'm telling you this now is not to shove it in your face, but to remind you, some of the information that you're hearing as far as modding goes, not only from myself, but other sources and counters, might be affected by this. If you look at the special damage at my Adrad from Relic 9 to Relic 5, the difference is 3,000. And with Health and Protection, the difference is also 30,000. So, all that to say, don't be terribly discouraged when 10 guildmates tell you that they've been using this counter for a really long time, and then all of a sudden it fails flat for you. This might ultimately be why, and it is just something to take note of. So now with that disclaimer out of the way, we can actually start talking about some of the fun things that have to go on with the team. The first thing I want to cover actually is Zetas, and the reason why is because when I did the original evaluation of the pack, I mentioned that Rogue One is actually a low Zeta team, and that does continue to be true. Not a lot has changed in the last 2 days. Now, the 2 Zetas that I would say are mandatory for Rogue One are going to be on Admiral Raddus himself. I would like for it to be less. It's not, and I'll explain why. His first Zeta on his unique says, while Admiral Raddus is alive, Jyn Erso can't be defeated. This is a really big deal. Not just because you want Jyn to be alive, that is true, but because she is typically a weaker character with her lower health and protection, because she typically stays at Relic 5 and Adrad goes all the way up to Relic 9, the AI has a tendency, not always, but has a tendency to focus her down even though she can't be killed, resulting in some really fun interactions, especially if you're using them in conjunction on a Leia team where you can use R2 stealth and put it on Jyn, essentially giving yourself an unkillable tank. Without the Zeta, she can be killed pretty quickly, and then eventually someone will focus on Adrad after they run out of other allies. But if they don't, sometimes they just get stuck on Jyn, really making it not optional. The other one that I would say is not optional is going to be the special. All Rogue One allies gain Spark of Rebellion for 3 turns, which can't be copied. If you don't have the Zeta, the only real access that you have to Spark of Rebellion, which is a very important buff that they get, is going to be from the Omicron, and it's going to be limited to at the very beginning of the battle. So you really need this to be able to have permanent kills versus Empire characters. Not to mention, you are going to have an extra 40% offense and speed and some other things. And that 40% offense is important because we need as much offense as possible to be able to zap a lot of the bigger Empire teams like DTMG. So those 2 are the most important. I would probably go in the order that I just told you, but they're really, both are non-negotiable. The next 2 that are good, but you can really wait on for a long time, especially if you are low on Zetas, is going to be Jyn and K2s. Now, Jyn is on her unique, where it pretty much says that she can't be stunned, and Rogue One allies are immune to buff immunity. I really like this because that means you don't have to rely on as many cleanses from Adrad to be able to get Spark of the Rebellion going again. And her not being able to be stunned is nice in case you need her for a revive at some point in the battle. Not mandatory, but again, nice. K2SOs, he gains 1% max protection whenever he takes damage. Once you get a thicker K2, that 1% can be kind of nice considering he's the tank. Ultimately, again, he will do 99% of what he wants to do, even without it, so you don't have to worry about that all that much. And then, last and least is going to be Cassian's, to which I say, you. At the start of each encounter, all rebel allies gain protection up 20% for 3 turns. It's dispellable. Like, and they don't like get extra things when they have protection up like Padme would. Like it's just bad. Like I feel like this came out when Zetas first came out, and they're like, I don't know, he needs one, so just let it do something. Yeah, don't. I have a huge roster. I don't have this. You don't need it. You'll be fine. So that is overall Zetas. Moving on to Omicrons, which are actually very simple as well. The Omicron situation with Rogue One isn't great, and that actually might be good for you because that means you don't need to necessarily apply all that many. Adrads himself, I do like it. It's luxury, though. It pretty much allows him to have 40%, or the whole team to have 40% extra max protection, which is nice for survivability, because if Adrad can't survive long enough to use Hope, then some matches fall apart. And they are going to start with Spark of the Rebellion for 3 turns, which means you can hold his one special for a little bit longer, especially if someone has a Dispel, they come and use that right in the beginning. They also get a ton of buffs once it does get dispelled. So again, all these things are nice. They do help the Adrad team accomplish what they want to accomplish, but at the same time, I looked up the win rates with and without it, and it's like a 3-5% sway depending on the team. So is it good? Yeah. Do you need it to kill Iden? You don't. It'll be fine. Jin's, I won't spend a lot of time on. It's not bad. The problem is, in TW, with you using less teams just naturally, it just doesn't pull the weight to be able to do what you want to do. Fun fact, it actually used to have some effects that would carry over into GAC. That has been fixed, so that's not really a thing anymore. And Cassian's, again, EU. It's actually really cool lore-wise. It allows Cassian to turn into different characters depending on the territory battle map that he's in. But I mean, PvE Omicrons, I'm not huge on in general, and especially one that doesn't really involve special missions, at least on Rote. No thank you. Now, when it comes to the overall comps, Rogue One actually is pretty simple and straightforward. When it comes to 5v5, these are your core 4, and then beyond that, you can kind of just sub in whichever one of these Rogue One characters you want. I've looked through the win rates and actually tested them myself in GAC, and it doesn't really seem to change anything. SRP, for whatever reason, his kit in my head should outperform the others because he's a tank that revives, so you would think that that would take more pressure off of Adrad and Jin, or really Adrad that you don't want to die. But again, the counters seem to do the same. I think I looked into this, and Biston is able to charge Hope, which is Adrad's really big ability, a little bit more, but at the end of the day, you know, pick your poison. If you need one to go on another team, it's fine. I guess you could even throw Bodhi in there. You're going to have him at Relic 5. I don't think he'll do much, but, I mean, he's Rogue One. He won't break synergy, so it probably won't actually hurt all that much either. Now, the other 2 teams that we are suggesting here are going to revolve around the other characters that are also in these packs that don't necessarily go with Adrad. Baze and Chirrut go very well with Saw, and then Pow, and then I know Hoth Rebel Scout isn't in the pack, but the 2 of them go very well with Mon Mothma. The reason why I've left those 2 squads with 2 slots open is because Saw and Mon Mothma, at least at the current state of the game, are really fighting over the last 2 slots. They are both fighting over Kyle Katarn as well as Luthen. Now, there are some other good substitutes for these characters, actually like Drogon and Krex. The issue is, once you start putting these characters in, you take them away from their main teams like Leia and Phoenix, and things just start to get a little bit messy. So you can't really max out and make the 7 or 8 Rebel teams that you could make. You're going to have to pick and choose here and there, and most people end up picking between a Saw or a Mon Mothma team overall. So again, kind of choose what you want to do there. So that is the overall comps. For 3v3, if you're wondering for Adrad, most people use this combination right here. You can drop Cassian for Keiju. Again, in my head, that makes a lot more sense because you would typically want a tank there, but Cassian's debuffs actually can go a long ways depending on the team they're fighting. Just don't take Jin out of the team. She will be very, very important. Now, as far as the overall modding goes, they're pretty simple and they're not too heavy on speed, which is really nice. Adrad, before looking at his modding, I need to explain his big hit, aka Hope. He has essentially an ultimate ability that he will build throughout the battle, where it says limit once per use, requires 100% upload, revive all allies, and always recover health and protection. Then, deal true damage to all enemies and inflict healing immunity and protection disruption for 4 turns, which can't be dispelled, evaded, or resisted. The Adrad team does a terrible job at dealing damage through conventional methods. Like, you don't have a Dark Trooper, you don't have a Fennec. How they deal damage is either through a ton of damage through this hit itself or through exposes. I have really liked landing myself in a position, especially going against DTMG, which is kind of this team's biggest counter out there. I don't really even have to rely on exposes that much because now they have a bunch of cleanses, and I just want to be able to nuke them right out the gate. So what we have done is essentially loaded my AdRad up with as much offense as possible. So I have an offense set on him, and then on the arrow, the triangle, and the cross, all 3 are offense primaries. I have a defense set on him to help mitigate the damage, and then a protection circle. Protection and health kind of break even overall on all the characters for AdRad, just because they have protection recovery. They have protection up, which is based off of max health. They gain both through different methods, so they can really use both. You don't need to worry about it that much. I think I've gone more with protection on my team purely because I want to defend a little bit more against max health damage, even though it's not that prevalent in a lot of the counters they're used against. So overall, offensive as possible. The defense set on him just because he doesn't need potency or crit chance or anything, and I want him to survive, and the protection primary over there. Cassian is one of the few characters out there that you can just completely load up on potency. He has this really nice shot grenade that has a bunch of different debuffs that can be resisted, and in addition to that, oh, it also has a 2-turn cooldown, so he'll be using that a lot. In addition to that, his base potency is pretty low, so combined with AdRad's leadership, which I believe gives about 60% in 5v5, I'm trying to get him to a full 200% so those can land as much as possible, because these actually do make a difference in some fights with and without Admiral Radis. Nothing else really special here. Protection primary, health primary, potency, speed. It's, again, just as much potency as possible. Jin, I have gone for an interesting mix of potency and speed, and she's one of the very, very, very few characters out there that I actually really like a crit chance primary on. A lot of her kit, while it doesn't revolve around damage, does want her to be critting pretty consistently. If she crits on her AoE, she will revive a random rebel ally with 20% max health for each critical hit scored. That's a pretty big deal, especially in 3v3 when your tank goes down and AdRad's vulnerable and the AI isn't going right after Jin, so you can revive them. That can be a nice use for you, as well as the fact that she can speed through her turns, where she can gain more turn meter here on a critical hit, stun the target enemy for 1 turn. So overall, crit chance is good. Potency is good because this is also subject to a potency check. And in addition to that, her being faster helps speed up the upload process for the hope ability we talked about previously. Then we have K2SO, who is actually one of the tanks that I would argue needs tenacity the most, as you can see by my full tenacity sets. And the reason why is because he doesn't really have a consistent taunt. If you look on both of his abilities, or his basic and his special, I should say, he doesn't taunt. Like, there's no taunt wording here, there's no taunt wording here. It's actually hidden in his unique. This is whenever K2SO uses an ability, he has a 75% or 100% chance, while buff, chance to taunt for 1 turn. So he only taunts for 1 turn, and this taunt is dispelled whenever he takes damage. So pretty much, he needs to constantly be countering, and he can't counter if he's dazed or if he has shock on him. Well, I guess he can counter if he has shock on him, but he can't regain the buff if he has shock. So we're trying to mitigate those debuffs as much as possible because he's one of the easier tanks to stop from taunting. So I have him loaded up with a bunch of tenacity. Again, he does get a bonus of that through AdRad. Actually, the potency bonus we talked about before might not be a thing. That I might have been confusing that with the tenacity. But overall, tenacity primary here, protection primary, protection primary, protection primary. Again, K2SO has his own protection recovery, albeit it is only 1%, so if you were to mod him for pure health, you're probably going to be just fine as well. And then the 5th for the team, their modding really doesn't matter. Again, you might actually be able to 4-man some of the comps out there. But speaking of things that you can beat, AdRad likes to beat Empire. AdRad likes to beat Empire a lot. If you look at his leadership ability, even without the Omicron, it does this really cool thing that says when an Empire enemy gains bonus turn meter, which is a lot, they are inflicted with daze for 2 turns. This completely shuts down both Emperor Palpatine without Starkiller, as well as Imperial Troopers, and then it does a lot of work on some of these other comps. Pretty much any Iden comp out there that can be built, as long as AdRad is built properly, and you don't have AdRad using AoE where he gets countered by all 5 characters at once and gets killed, you should have a pretty good win rate against any of those teams. Veers, same exact concept. They gain turn meter constantly. They spend the whole battle days. They can't move. They do actually beat Inquisitors as well if they don't have Reva in the team. They can in some situations if you're modded and comped for it properly, actually beat Riva. I've seen it happen under a few specific datacrons, and it does typically involve AdRad as well as 3 tanks to make sure that they don't get to him and that you're just kind of having him tank enough so that he's not dying to AoE attacks. It does beat most Dark Trooper Moff Gideon teams, although I've actually struggled with this counter, to be honest. I think one of the main reasons why is because Enoch actually does cause a lot of issues if your opponents have him in the team. Not only does it completely cut out crits, which messes with Jin's kit that we talked about earlier, but he's also going to add another cleanse to get rid of those exposes, which is one of our main forms of damage, and the extra turn meter is probably also not ideal, as they're going to speed through those debuffs that come from the ability Hope. And then again, they just completely destroy Emperor Palpatine, even in TW with the Mara Jade Omicron, assuming Starkiller is not the team. The issue is if they have Starkiller on the team with Emperor Palpatine and Mara Jade, he actually makes the entire team immune to daze. So that really fun thing that we talked about earlier in AdRad's leadership, it just kind of goes away completely. So those are the 5 main squads you'll beat on offense. I wouldn't necessarily recommend putting the team on defense, especially right now because one of the budget counters to Admiral Raddus is Bad Batch. And as you all probably know, that pack just got released as well. So that is our Zeta, Omicron, modding instructions, and then comps as well as what they beat. Thank you guys for watching, and until the next time, stay awesome.